So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul. I am married to Alice, who led us so well and leads us in worship here. She's a very talented singer, musician. The irony of that being that she married someone who got thrown out of percussion group at school because they can't keep time. I don't have a musical bone in my body. So I've got what I think are two of the most important jobs in the world. Firstly, as a husband to Alice, and secondly, as a father to Lily and Bertie. They're our two children, who are 4 and 7. I also work as a builder. That pays the bills, but for me, my identity is in being, a husband and a father. So, I've been asked to preach and continue our story in Exodus. Exodus chapter 8 is what we're going to look at. So, we will read it in sections as we go through it. I read it, being diligent, a couple of months ago when I was given the chapter, and I was, okay, so let's have a read through this. And what was it? It was the plagues. Plagues 2, 3 and 4. So we're looking at frogs, we're looking at gnats, we're looking at flies. Nature. I thought, okay, what do we do here? So I spoke to Bertie. Now Bertie, a 4-year-old, is nature mad. And I said to him, Bertie, frogs, what do we know about frogs? And he says, poison dart frog. And I was like, good. Deadly 60, Steve Backshaw, for those of you who know, Steve Backshaw is Bertie's absolute hero. So then I asked him about gnats. I said, gnats, and he was like, mosquitoes, do you mean mosquitoes? And he was like, and I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, they bite and they itch, and Mummy really doesn't like those. And I was like, yeah, no, that's true. And then I said, okay, about flies. What do we know about flies, Bertie? And he's like, well, there's lots of horses here, and there's horse flies, and they bite, and they're not very nice either. And then he was like, and flies are really hard to kill. So I was like, okay, thanks, Bertie, that's helpful, but it's probably not going to help us this morning. So I thought, okay, I'm going to need to just, knuckle down a bit more here and do a bit more study. It's not going to come from Bertie. So, where have we got to in the story of Moses so far? So Moses, he had a turbulent start to life. He grew up. He was born during a time when the sons should have all been killed. So his mother put him in a basket, literally sailed him down the river, and he was picked up by Pharaoh's daughter due to God's intervention. Pharaoh's daughter then brought him up as her own. And Moses grew up as an Israelite in the house of the Egyptians. Later on in life, he grows up and he knows that he's an Israelite, and he knows that he's living in this foreign land. And he sees some of his people being mistreated, some of the Israelites being mistreated, has a moment of rage, kills an Egyptian. He thinks he's got away with it, but he hasn't, because the next day someone makes a comment to say, you're going to kill me too. At this point, he thinks, okay, I know what I need to do. I need to leg it. So he's on his toes, and off he goes into the wilderness. He spends 40 years in the wilderness, and whilst he's there, he meets a priest, and he marries this priest's daughter, and he's living there for 40 years. And then he has an amazing encounter with a burning bush. And that during this, he sees and he experiences God's power at first hand. During this time, God asks him to return to the scene of his crime, return to Egypt. Can you go back there? And I want to use you to release my people from Pharaoh. So he does as he's asked. He goes back with his brother, and they return to the land of Egypt. They show Pharaoh God's power by the use of the staff and it turning into the snakes, as we've looked at before, and Pharaoh refuses. And the last time we looked at Exodus, Dale led us through the first of the plagues, where the rivers turned to the blood. So before we go into it in more detail, I just want to let you know kind of where I stand with the plagues. When I looked at it first, you put in an internet search on, the plagues, the 10 plagues, and there's loads of things which come back and they say, yeah, this could be natural occurrence. You could think, okay, so all the rivers have turned to blood, frogs come out of the rivers. Oh, look, the frogs all die. Oh, what happens next? We get loads of flies. Oh, the flies then go and bite people, bite animals. The cattle all die. Yeah, there's a natural progression. And I could see that. I was like, okay, yeah, that could be possible. And then I looked in more detail and I read and I studied, and we're going to read through this, but it is categorically not just a natural phenomenon. This is God's hand, and it's got God's print all over it. And throughout the Bible, God uses nature for his purposes. You've got the great flood, you've got the years of the feast and the famine. You go to the New Testament, you've got the calming of the storm. This is God using nature for his purposes throughout the Bible. So I'm just going to ask if Elliot can come up and read through the first 15 verses of Exodus 8, and we'll look at the plague of the frogs first.
I have forgotten my glasses as well.
You want to borrow some?
I'm good. I think I'm okay. It's just a bit blurry. So the plague of frogs. 7 days passed after the Lord struck the Nile. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'This is what the Lord says. Let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will send a plague of frogs on your whole country. The Nile will teem with frogs. They will come up into your palace and your bedroom, and onto your bed, into the houses of your officials and on your people, and into your ovens and kneading troughs. The frogs will come up on you and your people and all your officials.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the streams and canals and ponds, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt.' So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. But the magicians did the same thing by their secret arts. They also made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, 'Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord.' Moses said to Pharaoh, 'I leave you the honour of setting the time for me to pray, and your officials and your people, that you and your houses may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile.' 'Tomorrow,' Pharaoh said. Moses replied, 'It will be as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs will leave you and your houses, your officials and your people. They will remain only in the Nile.' After Moses and Aaron left Pharaoh, Moses cried out to the Lord about the frogs he had brought on Pharaoh, and the Lord did what Moses asked. The frogs died in the houses, in the courtyards and in the fields. They were piled into heaps, and the land reeked of them. But when Moses saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said."
Thank you. So, God has told Moses to return to Pharaoh, and at this time he's going to give Pharaoh a warning about what's going to happen. He's giving him the opportunity here to let his people go. And the warning is that there's going to be frogs. And there's going to be frogs everywhere. And just to reiterate, this isn't just frogs coming out of the river. Oh wow, there's a lot more frogs than there normally is. This is frogs in the towns. This is frogs in the temples. This is frogs in your house. This is frogs in your bed. This is frogs in your clothes, frogs in your ovens, frogs in your food bowls. You cannot step anywhere without squishing on a frog. This is a massive, massive plague. So there's not a written account of what Pharaoh says, but I think it's fair to assume he says, "No, your people, they are staying here." And then Aaron, he raises his staff, and the frogs emerge. They emerge from every water source. So they don't just emerge from the Nile. These frogs, they emerge from the canals, the ponds, the rivers. Every single water source these frogs are emerging from. And so Pharaoh calls for his magicians, and they're able to do the same thing. So we've got a plague of frogs. Frogs are swarming everywhere. Pharaoh calls his magicians, and using the devil's power, they're able to produce frogs. Now, the devil is very, very dangerous, and he's very, very powerful. And he also likes to mimic God, as we can see here. Here he is mimicking God. So he's got the power to make frogs appear. Well, let's have a think about this. He's making the frogs appear, but he's actually just making the problem worse. we've got a plague of frogs, and he's just brought, with his magicians, he's just brought more frogs in. And he can't remove any frogs. His magicians cannot get rid of the problem. They can't even remove the frogs that they've created. They're there and they're staying there. So they don't have the power, and the devil doesn't have the power to remove something that God has put in place. So the devil, he can't clear up his own mess. There's only one person that can do that, and that's God. God can clear up our mess. He can clear up the devil's mess. So we should be careful, because if we dabble in the world of the occult, if we dabble in things like tarot cards or psychic fairs or Ouija boards, even things like scary films, or in today's world, the reality TV, ghost hunters, things like that, we're entering a dark place. This is the world of the devil. This is where he is. This is his domain. The way to look at it is like a jack in the box, I guess. It's a box that you've got. And once you go and enter into that world, that box springs open and out pops the jack. But the spring and the catch on the box is broken. You can never, ever close that box. There's only one way to do it. And that is to ask Jesus to come in and to close that box, to put that catch back on and to seal that off. The devil, he wants you in his world. He gives you a one-way ticket to say, oh yes, come here, come here. But there's no exit from his world. There's only one way, and that is through our Saviour, Jesus Christ, and asking him to close that and to just seal that off. And he will do it. He is Lord over everything. He can shut down the devil and the devil's work. So, Pharaoh has probably, at this point, had enough of the frogs everywhere. He calls again for Moses. He's realised that his magicians have made things worse. That's all they've done. They've just produced more frogs. They've not helped in any way whatsoever. So he asks for Moses to remove the plague. And Moses wants to make this clear that this is God's work. So he says to Pharaoh, okay, we will remove the plague. But so that you know it's God that's doing this, when do you want the plague removed? You decide the time, and the time that you say, I will ask God and it will happen then. So Pharaoh says tomorrow, and at that point is when the plague ends. Moses prays and the plague ends the next day. So the frogs themselves, they were then dead frogs everywhere. They were heaped up in piles all around the land of Egypt. So you can imagine the stench of decaying frogs everywhere. The land stank, the whole land. And it's talked about in some commentaries as well that the land of Egypt was known to have a stench. And it was a stench, in this case, of death, the death of the frogs. So why frogs? Is there a relevance with the frogs? So the Egyptians had many, many gods, and they had many goddesses. And one of the Egyptian goddesses had the face of a frog, and this was the goddess of fertility. And so here we can see that God is using the picture of one of the Egyptians' own goddesses and saying to them, look, this is your goddess here. I can make this goddess appear and I can wipe it out like this. And look what your goddess has done to your land. Your goddess has made your land stink. Your land is now repulsive to everyone because of the frogs and the image that they had. So God is just showing how powerful he is here. He can make their false gods appear and he can make their false gods disappear. So let's move on then to the plague of the gnats. Elliot, if you could just do verses 16 to 19 for us.
Then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the ground, and throughout the land of Egypt the dust will become gnats. They did this, and when Aaron stretched out his hand with the staff and struck the dust of the ground, gnats came on people and animals. All the dust throughout the land of Egypt became gnats. But when the magicians tried to produce gnats by their secret arts, they could not. Since the gnats were on people and animals everywhere, magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he would not listen, just as the Lord had said.
So looking at this plague, there's no account here of Pharaoh being approached by Moses and giving the warning, okay, there's going to be a plague of gnats unless you let my people go. You know, God is here. He's a demonstration that God is Lord of all, control of all, and if he wants something to happen, it will happen when he wants it to happen. He doesn't have to go and ask permission. He doesn't have to give that warning. He's just saying, okay, you know, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen when I say it happens. So Moses did as he was instructed. Aaron raised his staff and then to strike the ground for the gnats to arrive. Now, gnats, mosquitoes, they are horrible things. So I can imagine this kind of being like, you know, the Highlands of Scotland are known for mosquitoes and, you know, everywhere. So imagine that times 1,000. You know, it's a swarm of gnats everywhere. We've all been walking down the road or cycling or running, and a gnat flies into your mouth. It gets you on the back of the throat. There you are. You're retching. You're about to throw up. It is horrible. Just imagine that every step you took, because there's gnats everywhere. You're just breathing them in, and they're hitting you and they're aggravating you. And not only that, you're trying to get to sleep. What's it like in the summer? There's that gnat in the room, isn't there? You're there, you're lying, you're thinking, come on, I just want to get to sleep. So you reach for the nearest thing and you spend 10 minutes trying to kill this gnat as it's flying around. No sleep because of the constant noise of the gnats. And then what do they do to the animals? The mosquitoes, they're there, they're biting the animals. The animals which the Egyptians had, they all become unruly because they're itchy, they're getting aggravated all the time. It wasn't, you know, they didn't have little things to put over the animals' eyes to stop them, you know, from irritating them. So they're getting agitated, and they can't handle the cattle or anything. And then you've got the bites, the incessant itching, the swelling, you know, people are walking around. What happens when you get a gnat? Well, I can only talk for myself. But you get a mosquito bite, and then it oozes that little bit of pus. It's just, it's disgusting. What? So, you know, it's kind of, it's just not pleasant. And that everyone is suffering from this. And, you know, I was thinking about the gnats, and I was like, here it is. This is one of the smallest of creatures, the gnat, that God is using. And he's using it, and it is causing maximum discomfort to the Egyptians here. And so small things can have a massive, massive impact, and that can be for good and for bad. Let's have a think about it. A tiny spark can cause a massive forest fire. It can cause a massive fire anywhere, which can cause death and destruction. A small change in a virus can cause a whole world to lock down in a pandemic. You know, it's something so small which we can't see, and it has massive, massive consequences. And at the same time, a carefully chosen word, or a careless word, in fact, can have a massive, massive, massive consequence in a conversation. It can cause untold amounts of harm. But the flip side of that is a carefully chosen word can have enormous joy. So this is the R moment. So when Casper, the barn owl, he had a little ring attached to his leg, and he flew down onto Alice's hand. And she looked at me. She said one little word. No, it was yes. She said yes. And that has had a massively positive impact on my life. Thank you. So Pharaoh is continuing to use one word, and that word is no. He's saying no to God. No, I'm not releasing your people. No, God, it's not happening. No, that was he was saying all the time, and the impact across his land was massive. So are we guilty of saying no to God? No, Lord, I can't pray now. I don't have the time. I can't worship you, Lord, now. I'm busy. Is there a tiny change that we can make in our lives? And that would have a massive impact on those around us. So, what if we were to set screen time timers on our own screens, not just those of our children? Would we have more time to worship God, to pray to God? What if we said yes to attending a life group? How much more could we grow in our faith and in our community? And on that as well, if we're faithful with the small things, God will bless us with much more. We have a God who loves to give us small things. He loves to entrust us with little things so that we can learn how to deal with them, and then we will be trusted with much more. If we can be good stewards of things which are small, he will bless us with much more. But we have to show that we can look after the small things well first. So if you're here and you don't know Jesus, you don't know him as your saviour, what would happen if you were to say yes to him? What would happen if you were to say, yes, Lord, forgive me, come into my life? Let me tell you, you would be saying yes to an eternity in heaven, yes to a life of knowing that you're saved, yes to knowing that you are one of God's children, yes to having your sins removed, yes to having your guilt and shame taken away. Yes to Jesus will completely change your future. That yes is the biggest and the best yes that you can say. So going back to Pharaoh, his magicians tried to produce gnats and they couldn't. Don't ask me why you would want them to produce gnats when they've already shown that they can't remove anything that they produce. And those magicians said, this is the finger of God. God is doing this. So Pharaoh didn't do, there's no account anyway of Pharaoh asking for Moses and Aaron to return in this one and for the plague to be removed. We assume that the plague was removed, but there's no account of it in the story. So if I can ask Elliot to come up and read to the end of the chapter for us.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Get up early in the morning and confront Pharaoh as he goes to the river and say to him, 'This is what the Lord says, let my people go, so that they may worship me. If you do not let my people go, I will send swarms of flies on you and your officials, on your people and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of flies, even the ground will be covered in them. But on that day I will deal differently with the land of Goshen, where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land. I will make a distinction between my people and your people. This sign will occur tomorrow.' And the Lord did this. Dense swarms of flies poured into Pharaoh's palace and into the houses of his officials throughout Egypt, and the land was ruined by the flies. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, 'Go, sacrifice to your God here in the land.' But Moses said, 'That would not be right. The sacrifices we offer the Lord our God would be detestable to the Egyptians. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? We must take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, as he commands us.' Pharaoh said, 'I will let you go to offer sacrifices to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but you must not go very far. Now pray for me.' Moses answered, 'As soon as I leave you, I will pray to the Lord, and tomorrow the flies will leave Pharaoh and his officials and his people. Only let Pharaoh be sure that he does not act deceitfully again by not letting the people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord.' Then Moses left Pharaoh and prayed to the Lord, and the Lord did what Moses asked. The flies left Pharaoh and his officials and his peoples. Not a fly remained. But this time also Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the people go."
Thank you. So God told Moses to meet Pharaoh down by the river early in the morning. Imagine he's going down there to have a wash. And his petition was the same. It's the same as it has been previously. Let my people go so that they may worship me. And this time it's followed with a warning. a warning that was about to, that there was a plague that was about to come. And this was the plague of the flies. The flies were going to be everywhere. And there was a difference here. This is that God is going to separate his people from within this land. And his people living in Goshen, the Israelites, they're going to be spared this plague. There is not going to be a single fly on them. Whereas the Egyptians are going to be covered in flies. So this is God showing, look, I'm in charge here, and this is my work. He's deciding the plague, he's deciding who will feel the effects of the plague, and he's deciding when the plague will start. So it occurs as God has said it would, and the flies are described as dense. So it's one of the first times where we learn that the severity of the plague is described as, it's saying these flies are dense. So it's like a fog of flies that you can't see through. Nowhere is safe from the flies. You're blinded by the flies. You can't open your mouth to breathe. A bit like the gnats, the flies they're just there. The air is thick with them. And yet, in the land of Goshen, there isn't a single fly. The Israelites there, they're able to breathe. They're able to live normally. God is showing Pharaoh that his people are set apart and they don't have to suffer in the same way. And it also shows Pharaoh that God is present in his lands. This is Pharaoh. He thinks he's Lord of his land, but God is saying, no, I'm present here. I am here as well. Now, for us, God is present wherever we are. It doesn't matter how dark that place that you think you are in, God is there. And he is there because of his unbinding love for us. He loves us with such passion that he wants to be there wherever we are. And however dark that place is, he is there with you. And he wants to be there to encourage you and to pick you up when you turn to him. So Lily and Bertie, they love playing hide and seek. They love it at home. I'm the current champion, I used to get paid to play hide and seek. That's a true story, but that's another story. I could hide for days and no one would see me. That was my speciality. So that, it's a bit unfair really to play it with them because they don't stand a chance. But using that as an analogy, we can't hide from God. God, he is everywhere by our side. It doesn't matter where you are in your life, how far away you think you are from God. You think you've run 100 miles away from God. I like to run, but I can't outrun God. No one can outrun God. He is there by our side every single moment. You're hiding in that cupboard. You've closed the door of the cupboard because you want to barricade and be there so no one can see you, but God can see you. He is there. He hides. He is there with you in those small spaces. And all you need to do is just turn to him and he will be there and he will pick you up. How many times have we heard testimonies of, I found God when I got to the bottom of a bottle of whiskey. I found God after I tried every natural and man-made high that there is in the world. That was when I found God. And when I was at my lowest of lows, God is there in those dark places, in those low moments. He is there, he is with you, and he wants to pick you up and help you.
Yes.
So then Pharaoh asked for Moses to come back. And he says, can you take this plague away? Now I get the impression here that Pharaoh is thinking, well, I've got a get out of jail free card here. I've got Moses and Aaron. They can remove these plagues for me. And so he says, can you do this? But can you do it here in my land? Can you just go and sacrifice to your God here in my land and take this plague away? And Moses is saying, no, that's not the way it works. Firstly, Moses is kind of thinking, hang on, if the Egyptians are here in this land and we sacrifice to our God, the God of the Israelites, in the land of the Egyptian people are going to there's going to be an uproar for them as well. So Moses is going to have unrest on his hand. But also, and most importantly, sacrificing to their God in the land of the Egyptians it just goes against everything that Moses and Aaron are trying to say to Pharaoh. They're saying we need to release these people, not do the work here. So Moses says to Pharaoh, "No, it's not. That's not going to happen. I can do this, but we can do it on our terms. We need to travel away." So Pharaoh agrees in the end and says, "Okay." And then he says something intriguing. He asks to be prayed for. Pharaoh says, "Can you pray for me to your God?" And at the moment, I don't have an answer for that. Was it a desperation? Was it a plea? I haven't got to the bottom of that one. But Moses says, "Yes, I will pray for you as soon as I leave." And he then says that tomorrow the plague will be over. So Moses goes away, and it was as he says. The next day, the flies were completely gone. Not a single fly remained. God's removal of that plague was complete. 100%, all of the flies gone. It's similar to our salvation. If we ask for salvation, every single ounce of our sin is taken away. Every single bit. That bit that you've been hiding away right down deep in the dark, but nobody knows about, you've never even uttered about it, God's taken that away. He knows, and it's gone. He wipes our slate clean, completely clean. So as we close, there's just 4 things that I'd like us to take away. And they're all very brief, don't worry. So, the first one is a bit of a warning, and the other 3, depending on where we are, they should be an encouragement or a challenge, depending on your relationship. Firstly, the devil is a mimic, and he will try and deceive us. We think of the dark magic. It's only a film, it's only a reality TV show, it's only a Ouija board, it's only a game. And then if we enter into this world of dark magic, the devil won't close the lid on that box. Only Jesus can do that. Now, if that's something that you need prayer for today, then please come and find me afterwards, or one of the elders, or someone that you know and trust, and let's get that box closed today. Let's seal that off. Secondly, God uses the small things. You think of those gnats, the tiny. Small things can have a massive impact. So is there a small change that you need to make that will improve your relationship with God? And if you don't know Jesus, it's only a small prayer and your whole life will change. Thirdly, God is present everywhere. And wherever we find ourselves, God is. Are you purposely trying to hide from him? You have a part of your life that is yours and yours alone, and that you're not letting go of. Remember that God is the master of hide and seek. He is the ultimate long distance runner. Hand those things over to him, because he already knows about them. You've just got to give it to him. And fourthly, God looks after his people. The Israelites in the land of Goshen, they were not touched by the swarms of the flies. So if you are God's, you have absolutely nothing to fear. This life, it's going to have its ups and downs, because we're here, we're human. We have our ups and downs. But our future is secure in heaven. So, just want you to think of one thing this week that you might be able to change, and that you will change, that's going to improve your relationship with God, your relationship with those around you. And if you have those burdens, let's cast them onto God. And we're going to go to communion in a minute, and let's just anything that is troubling you, let's hand it over to him before we get to that communion table. And if you don't know Jesus as your Saviour, my small question is to you, why not? What is it that's stopping you?